Oroonoko, or The Royal Slave, is a relatively short novel set in a narrative frame. The narrator opens with an account of the colony of Surinam and its inhabitants. Within this is a historical tale concerning the Coramantien grandson of an African king, Prince Oroonoko. At a very young age, Prince Oroonoko was trained for battle, becoming an expert captain by the age of 17. During a battle, the best general sacrifices himself for the prince by taking an arrow for him. In sight of this event, the prince takes the place of general. Oroonoko decides to honorably visit the daughter of the deceased general to offer the trophies of her father's victories. But he immediately falls in love with Imonda and later asks for her hand in marriage. The king hears Imonda described as the most beautiful and charming in the land, and he also falls in love, despite his intelligence saying she had been claimed by Oroonoko. The king gives Imonda the royal veil, thus forcing her to become one of his wives, even though she is already promised to Oroonoko. Imonda unwillingly, but dutifully, enters the king's harem, the Otan, and Oroonoko is comforted by his assumption that the king is too old to ravish her. Over time, the prince plans a tryst with the help of the sympathetic Onahal, one of the king's wives, and Abong, a friend to the prince. The prince and Imonda are reunited for a short time and consummate their marriage. But they are eventually discovered. Imonda and Onahal are punished for their actions by being sold as slaves. The king's guilt, however, leads him to lie to Oroonoko that Imonda has instead been executed, since death was thought to be better than slavery. The prince grieves. Later, after winning another tribal war, Oroonoko and his men visit a European slave trader on his ship and are tricked and shackled after drinking. The slave trader plans to sell the prince and his men as slaves and carries them to Surinam in the West Indies. Oroonoko is purchased by a Cornish man named Treffry, but given special treatment due to his education and ability to speak French and English, which he learned from his own French mentor. Treffry mentions that he came to own a most beautiful enslaved woman and had to stop himself from raping her. Unbeknownst to Oroonoko, Treffry is speaking of Imonda, who is at the same plantation. The two lovers are reunited under the slave names of Cesar and Clement. The narrator and Treffry continue to treat the hero as an honored guest. The narrator recounts various entertaining episodes, including reading, hunting, visiting native villages, and capturing an electric eel. Oroonoko and Imonda live as husband and wife in their own slave cottage. And once she becomes pregnant, Oroonoko petitions for their return to the homeland. After being put off with vague promises of the governor's arrival, Oroonoko organizes a slave revolt. The slaves, including Imonda, fight valiantly, but the majority surrender when Deputy Governor Byam promises them amnesty. After the surrender, Oroonoko and Tuscan, his second-in-command, are punished and whipped by their former allies at the command of Byam. To avenge his honor, Oroonoko vows to kill Byam. He worries, however, that to do so would make Imonda vulnerable to reprisal after his death. The couple both decide that he should kill her, and so Imonda dies by his hand. Oroonoko hides in the woods to mourn her and grows weaker, becoming unable to complete his revenge. When he is discovered, he decides to show his fearlessness in the face of death. Oroonoko cuts off a piece of his own throat, disembowels himself, and stabs the first man who tries to approach him. Once captured, he is bound to a post resigned to his death. Oroonoko asks for a pipe to smoke as Bannister has him quartered and dismembered. The novel is written in a mixture of first and third person, as the narrator relates events in Africa secondhand, and herself witnesses and participates in the actions that take place in Surinam. The narrator is a lady who has come to Suriname with her unnamed father, a man intended to be the new lieutenant general of the colony. He, however, dies on the voyage from illness. The narrator and her family are put up in the finest house in the settlement, in accord with their station. And the narrator's experiences of meeting the indigenous peoples and slaves are intermixed with the main plot of Oroonoko and Imonda. At the conclusion of the narrative, the narrator leaves Suriname for London. Structurally, there are three significant pieces to the narrative, which does not flow in a strictly biographical manner. The novel opens with a statement of veracity, wherein the narrator claims to be writing neither fiction nor pedantic history. She claims to be an eyewitness and to be writing without any embellishment or agenda, relying solely upon real events. A description of Suriname and the Southern American Indians follows. The narrator regards the indigenous peoples as innocent and living in a golden age. Next, she provides the history of Oroonoko in Africa, the betrayal by his grandfather, the captivity of Imonda, and his capture by the slaver captain. The narrative then returns to Suriname and the present. Oroonoko and Imonda are reunited, and Oroonoko and Imonda meet the narrator and Treffry. The final section describes Oroonoko's rebellion and its aftermath.